Hi everyone, and welcome to the Gene-Sis Soul Hacks, a 49-day transformational journey to our higher selves. I'm going to start this week, which is our introduction as we talk about what we're going to be journeying through over the next 7 weeks, by explaining a little bit about where the idea for this course came about. And it starts many thousands of years ago in a very ancient place known as the land of Egypt. Not the Egypt that we know of today, but ancient Egypt. We know that there is a very popular, very commonly referenced point in history that's referred to as the Jewish people's exodus from Egypt. It's the linchpin of the Jewish experience. The holiday of Passover is built around this exodus from Egypt. And we often hear stories within Jewish literature that refers to different points of constriction in the psyche of the Jewish people. And this refers to all peoples. When we think about these periods, these times when people have been under subjugation, under slavery, under the rule of a foreign nation, and this applies not just to the Jewish people but to all people, we can start to understand a lot about how our psyche gets developed. When we're in a state of slavery, in a state of constriction, we're not fully allowed to be who we really want to be. We're restricted, whether it's by an outside being that's restricting us from doing that or ourselves. So the Jewish story of the Exodus from Egypt is a lot more than a historical story of the tale of how a nation came into being. Sure, we know all about that story. We know about Moses. We know about how the people came and crossed the Red Sea and moved from exile into freedom. We know about the 10 plagues. We know about Pharaoh, who refused to let the Jewish people go. But what does that mean for us today, 2016, celebrating Passover with our families, with our friends, going past the supermarket aisle and picking up some matzah? What does it mean? And the answer to that can be found when we look at the Hebrew term for the word Egypt. Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. And when we look at the root of that word in Hebrew, Mitzrayim comes from the word Meitzar, which is narrow place, constriction. Sar is narrow. In Psalms, King David often refers to times, when I was within the most narrow of narrow places, God answered me and I came to a place of openness. So we know that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they didn't just leave a place where they were subjugated and forced to build all kinds of structures for the Egyptian people, but they were also came from a place of constriction into a place of expansion, into a place of freedom, into a place of liberation. And the story of the Exodus from Egypt is a very commonly referenced story throughout Jewish practice, throughout Jewish liturgy, and throughout the psyche of the Jewish people. Why? The answer is within one of the Passover prayers in the Haggadah, which is, in every generation, a person must view himself as if he or she, too, exited the land of Egypt. What does that mean? Well, it's not as simple as saying, I was living in one place and I packed up my bags overnight and bam, I went into a desert. No, our exodus from Egypt comes from within. Our exodus from Egypt comes from looking at the slavery that we subjugate ourselves to in our real lives. Often a lot of the slavery that we experience is not, it's self-created. It's something that we create for ourselves. It might be a habit. It might be the need to constantly check our cell phones. It might be the need to have a cigarette every day. It might be a certain person who has a hold over us, and we often turn to them for validation or turn to them for recognition rather than responding to our own true selves. Every single person has their own inner place of slavery. But we have to remember that that slavery is an illusion. That at the end of the day, the only person we are responsible to is ourselves, and our higher self at that. Our higher self, our state of divine soul being that wants only what's best for us, that wants to actualize him or herself and be the exactly perfect, amazing being that we all have the capacity to be. So what is the Sefirat HaOmer journey? Well, again, we can look at this all from understanding the historical period of the original Exodus from Egypt that happened many thousands of years ago. It begins with the Jewish people coming together, massing at the gates of Egypt, what was known to be an iron prison that no one could ever get out of back in those days. And as they exited Egypt en masse and walked out into the desert, you would think, they're free now. We're free, free at last. And now it's time to sing, dance, and be merry with God in the desert, which is the quotation that Moses gives to Pharaoh. He says, let my people go so they can serve. Let them go and celebrate with festivals in the desert, bring sacrifices to the Lord God, and be at one and experience divine ecstasy. But that's not what happened. Those of us who are familiar with the Jewish history know that the Jewish people left Egypt. They journeyed for 7 days before the very grand crossing of the Red Sea, after which they journeyed for another period of 42 days, making 49 days altogether, before they finally reached Mount Sinai, which was the climax, that pinnacle of their redemption. When they reached Mount Sinai and they were able to receive the full divine revelation that took place at Sinai. So you would think that once they've left Egypt, they're ready. This is it. God is taking them out, and they're here in the now, and they're going to go and receive the divinity. But this is where we understand that freedom does not necessarily equal revelation. Once we acknowledge that we're slaves, once we acknowledge that we have these habits and these barriers that draw us down, that constrict us, we're not immediately ready to expand and receive full revelation. That takes time. Think about a balloon. You can't just, it takes a minute. You watch it you watch it expand slowly until it's fully ready. It doesn't just go from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. Or maybe some cars do, if we believe all the advertising. So that 49-day period is crucial. And the understanding of the Jewish people leaving Egypt is that they had spent so many years in Egypt, entrenched in the slavery of Egypt. What does Egypt represent? Egypt is a representation of our society today. Egypt was a society that was so sophisticated. They had every type of technology you can imagine. It's almost the same as the slavery that we experience today to our technological devices, to the corporations and the structures that govern our economy and that govern our society. It's very common for us to say, look, I try to be a spiritual being, I try to be the best person I can be, but I live in this land and this is what I experience on a daily basis, so this is the best that I can do. And that's how Egypt was. The Jewish people, when they were in Egypt, really didn't feel the need to go out. They were really quite happy, even though they were slaves and they were crying out with how miserable their life was. They couldn't imagine another life outside of slavery. They couldn't imagine the fact that perhaps freedom and liberation was a possibility. And it took somebody like Moses, the teacher, to come to them and say, you can be free. You can escape. And sure, it's not going to be easy. There are tales of how when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were in the desert, they started complaining, they started missing Egypt. They said, in Egypt we were taken care of. We could eat meat. We had our homes. We had everything there. Granted, we were slaves, but we knew what was what. We knew where we were at. We had a structure. We had a framework. We're human beings and we like structure and we like frameworks. So we get very confused and very lost when we're suddenly outside of those structures. And that's what happens when we exit Egypt. When we exit Egypt, we move into another framework. And that is the framework called Sfirat HaOmer, which is what I'm going to be taking you through for these next 7 weeks. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they'd spent so long entrenched in that society that they genuinely did not have the capacity to receive divine revelation. When we first make that acknowledgement that I'm ready to leave behind this habit, this constriction that's enslaving me, because no one can enslave me. No one has capacity over me except myself and the divine. Therefore, I take full responsibility for my actions, and I am completely my own master. When we make that decision, we're not completely ready to then move into divine revelation. It's a process, and that process is a 49-day journey of transformation called the Omer. The Jewish people, when they left Egypt, were sunk into the 49th level of impurity, of cloudiness, of crust, of soul crust is the term that I use. And a really simple way to understand this would be the way that we live. So we live in society, we live in cities, maybe we live out in the country if we're blessed. We're all blessed, but of course some of us are more blessed in that way. And we go through our lives every day thinking about how we can be our best selves, but sometimes life gets in the way. So you're walking down the street and you see somebody with their hand out begging, but you don't have $1 available, or maybe you don't want to contribute more to this problem, or maybe you just think you might spend it on booze, so you say, sorry. And you have all the right intentions in saying, sorry, I can't give you $1. But when you do that, that little level of empathy that we have between ourselves and another human being, we have to cut something off. So we crust our souls. We create a crust, and that crust gets thicker and thicker every single time. Every time someone says, hey, can you help me out? You say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm really late. I have a meeting right now. Every time somebody calls you and you say, look, I can't talk to you right now. Every time you roll your eyes at someone or something, every time we act a little bit less divine, we create a crust on our souls. And in that crust, the divinity still remains. So how do we uncover the crust? Well, we're going to hack our way into being souls again, and that's what the next 49 days is about. When the Jewish people left Egypt, when the Israelites left Egypt and they were covered in this crust, it took 49 days to uncrust them, to hack their way through into the souls again before they were ready to receive divine revelation at Sinai. And how? How did they receive that divine revelation? It took 49 days, 7 and 7. 7 is a number that it signifies completion. 7 is the amount of days of the week. In that 49 days, they were able to journey day by day, layer by layer, until they reached full revelation. 7 weeks after the first night of Passover is another holiday, a Jewish holiday called Shavuot, which also means weeks. It's also known as Pentecost. And that was when they received the divine revelation. Now, these are also mapped onto the agricultural understanding of how we blossom and bloom and grow and reap harvest as people. Passover is the spring holiday. Passover is about that first little blossom that blooms. It's about that first little bud that we see on the trees, and we go out right about this time of year and we see a little bud, and I apologize to those of us in the southern hemisphere, including myself at this time. We see this little bud, and then we see it blossom, and we get excited because now there's hope. Now we know that we can get ourselves out of this mess, that we can expand and grow as people, that the sunshine is on the way. That's the beginning. That's Passover. On the second night of Passover, it was customary in the times of ancient Israel for the people to go out into the fields and to harvest the first sheaf of barley, of grain that they would find out in the fields. They would look outside and they would say, do you see the moon? Yes, I see the moon. This means that it is the full moon. It is exactly this time of the month, and we are now going to cut away this sheaf. We're going to show that we have the capacity to blossom and to grow, that our time of growth is coming. From then, they would count 7 weeks, 49 days, until they reached Shavuot, which was the next holiday, which was the holiday of the first fruits. That holiday was when they would bring an offering called the Omer offering. And the Omer offering represented that first harvest, not the main harvest, which was the next agricultural holiday. So there are 3 agricultural holidays represented in Judaism. We have Passover as the first one, Shavuot is the second one, and Sukkot, which is harvest, is the third one. And they really represent our own personal journeys as we blossom and bloom in the spring, as we get ready to say, yes, I had a tough winter, I was in a state of constriction, but now I'm ready to expand and be who I can truly be. Then we see that little initial blossom and bud in Passover. Shavuot, we see the next reaping of the first fruits of our harvest, and then we go through the full summer period and we reap it all on Sukkot. So that 7-week period is really, really crucial, and it's called Sefirat HaOmer. Sefirah means counting. It also has another meaning, and this is what we're going to go through over the next 7 weeks. Sephirah is a term for 7 or really 10 distinct attributes that exist in the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is the ancient wisdom, ancient mystical wisdom of Jewish sacred mystics beginning out in ancient Israel, very evolving in Spain, and then of course in Israel as well with the mystics of Sefer of Tzfat in the 15th century. So we're not going through a history of Kabbalah right now. That will have to be for another course, but we do have to acknowledge that this is all based very distinctly on Kabbalistic teachings. What we know about these 10 Sephirot, there are 10 altogether, but we're going to be focusing on 7 specifically through this time period, is that the 10 Sephirot are all attributes of both divinity and humanity, because everything is built on the same building blocks. So we have 7 key emotional attributes. The first three are the first 3 at the top, and the topmost one is about divinity, following through into our intellect. But then we reach the 7 of our emotions. And these actually map the chakras very closely. So we have the beginning, chesed. Chesed is loving kindness. It's heart opening. It's that first initial push of love and expression and that emotion of just kindness and effusion that we feel. Now, the way that the Sephirot are mapped is that we have the left side and the right side, and everything has its counterpoint, and everything meets in the middle to achieve balance. So what happens is we journey through all 7 of them, and I'll list them out for you just generally right now, and of course every week we'll journey them into more detail. And every one of the 7 maps across the other 7 to create 49 complete permutations, which is really 49 distinct levels of our own personal work, our own transformation. So we begin with chesed, loving kindness. We move over into its counterpart, restriction, judgment, severity, boundaries, really, if we think about it. That's called gevurah. They come together to reach the beauty of balance, compassion, and that is called tiferet. Most of us, we like that one, it's our favorite. We then start journeying down from the heart into our visceral section, into our solar plexus, into where all the magic happens, the challenges, our arms as well. So we have on one side, we have netzach. Netzach is ambition, it's endurance, it's victories and triumphs. It's saying, I have the confidence to get this done and to move into the future powerfully. Countering it on the other side, we have hod, which is humility, acknowledgement, gratitude, building a team around us to say, I have all the resources that I need to get this done, but I also need to acknowledge where my limitations are, to find the help that I need to get this done, to build a team around me, and to have gratitude and acknowledge those who are helping me. They come together, Netzach and Hod, into Yesod, which is grounding, foundation, bonding, finding your ground, knowing who you are, to stand together, and then have that capacity to join everything and burst forth in an effusive manner, and bond with another, which leads us to our final sephira, Malchut, expression. This is the feminine attribute that indicates the expression of all of these qualities into something else, something new, something other than ourselves. Suddenly we're becoming sovereign over ourselves. Malchut is kingship and sovereignty and nobility. It's saying, I've now taken all of this and I'm now creating something new from it. So we're going to be journeying through all 7 of these attributes over the next 7 weeks. And within each 7, we have the other 7. So we map them on one another so that we can build the restriction and the boundaries within loving kindness, because we know that there is no love without boundaries. We build the humility and the gratitude within ambition and confidence, because important as it is to be confident, we know that we need to counter that with our acknowledgement. And we'll be building through that every single day for the next 7 weeks, and I'm really excited to have you join in this journey. The Sephirot, these attributes, are also known as the tree of life. Why is it the tree of life? Well, I think that's going to be fairly self-explanatory as we move on. But of course, we know that the tree of life is something that when you hold on to it, when you grasp it, you'll always see success and happiness and joy. It says, Torah is like a tree of life to those who hold on to it, and those who support her are happy. We know that when we follow these attributes and we work within ourselves to uncrust our souls, to hack our way to greater soul beings, we will see the truth in transformation, happiness, and reach our higher selves. I'm really excited to have you join me in this journey. And I wanted to start with the introduction so that you understand not only what these 7 sefirot stand for, but also what our work of this week. This week, we're on week 1 right now. We're actually on intro week, because I'd like to consider Chesed, which will begin on April 23rd, I believe, as week 1. What are we doing this week? What's our real journey? Where are we starting? And, there's that famous quote from Instagram. I'm sure it's from somebody famous. This is terrible. I'm quoting Instagram, which is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This is our single step. Getting out of Egypt is our single step. Getting out of Egypt is not the entire work. It's not the full transformation. We spend so much time preparing for Passover. Traditionally, the preparation for Passover involves scrubbing through one's home and one's personal belongings to search for any leavened item. What's a leavened item? Well, traditionally, leavening would mean bread that has had the time to rise, to ferment in a way, and therefore it goes from being a flat bread like matzah into something that's a little bit more raised and puffy with self-importance, with ego. And in that separation of chametz, of leavened bread and items, into matzah, which is the flat, hard bread that we eat on Passover, we're also scrubbing through our own egos. We're really going in and we're saying, I don't want this anymore. I'm done. I'm leaving this behind. So in traditional Jewish homes where there's so much work done to scrub every corner of the house for every piece of leaven, we need to be doing that within our own egos, within our own hearts and minds, to say, what is this habit that's left behind? Do I really want this to come with me out of Egypt? I'm leaving this behind. Have fun, Egyptians. You can go through my home and see what you can find that interests you, because I am free. I am liberated. I'm leaving this behind to become the best person I can be. And maybe there's someone out there telling you, but if you become the kind of person that doesn't do this anymore, then who are you going to be? I don't want to be that sort of person. If I become someone who only eats vegan food and I can't go out to restaurants with my friends, then no one's going to want to spend time with me. If I give up smoking, then suddenly I'm not going to be able to go outside with everyone during a cigarette break and have a conversation. So we have to leave those thoughts, those limitations behind, and realize that if we want to experience true transformation, the first step comes from acknowledgement, saying, I'm ready. I want to leave these things behind because they are not serving me any longer. Now, it's up to you whether you choose a specific intention for this Spirit Homer period, or whether you prefer to see what comes up and work with everything as it comes. The reason I've chosen to share this with you all this year is because last year I took on a very similar journey. And it suffice to say, especially for those of you who know me, that it changed my life and there's no going back now. And if you'd said to me 12 months ago that I would become the person who is doing an online course like this, or who has taken on certain practices that I probably once would have laughed at, I would have said, no, what is this? I don't want this. But I knew what I wanted. And what I wanted was to completely open my heart and uncrust my soul. And in doing that, I had to do certain things that perhaps on paper I never would have wanted to. But seeing that they came with the package of getting what I do want, I know now how important it is to say goodbye to those habits. I'm done with you. I don't need you anymore. You were serving me because I was in a place that was an Egypt to me. I was constricted. I was held back. I was enslaved. So I needed you to be my comforts of slavery. But now that I'm no longer a slave and now that I'm free, I don't need you. I'm stepping into a new framework. as I get ready to receive divine revelation. And that framework is about freedom. It's about transformation. It's about reaching into my highest self and becoming the best person I can be. And that person is none other than me. So I'm ready. I'm ready to go out of Egypt, and I invite you to join me in that. This is the introduction to our course. I'll be posting this on Facebook as a teaser for those of you who have not yet signed up, and I would hope and encourage you to join us. You'll be receiving a weekly video, very similar to this one, where we go through each one of the Sephirot, where we understand the Kabbalistic mystical underpinnings of attributes like love, restriction, gratitude, grounding, ambition. And beyond that, we'll also be going through daily practices. So I'll be sending out emails every day where we receive one soul hack, just one. So this is not something like take on all of these new habits at once and do them every day. No. And they can build on each other. It might be to do something one day which you can keep doing the next 48 days, but it might also be something just to do once. See how you feel doing it once. If it feels good, do it again. If it doesn't, find another way to do it. But we move on from there. Do you hear that sound? That's our wake-up call. That's the wake-up call saying, it's time to wake up. It's time to be our best selves. I don't want to be a slave anymore. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be me. I don't want there to be a cross of my soul. I'm ready. So I invite you all to join me. If you haven't signed up yet, you can visit thegene-sis.com, www.thegene hyphen, do not forget the hyphen sis.com. It's $49. It's basically $1 a day. So imagine that as the dollar you give to the homeless man every day, or a quarter of a latte. And you'll be receiving an email every day with a different soul hack. And in some cases, you'll be receiving bonuses such as meditations and journal exercises. You'll also be getting access to this video every week. This video will be accessible to all, but moving on, they'll be accessible only to those who sign up for the course. So I really encourage you to join me as we prepare for freedom, liberation, liberty. God bless you all. Wishing you a wonderful, happy Passover.